Hello everyone, Hobbyist here. We are back at it again with another Nemesis character guide. Last time we covered the android and just how pretty powerful that character is. And as we're going through the rest of the Nemesis Aftermath characters, we're kind of realizing just how much more experimentation and thought was put into these guys in comparison to the normal Nemesis crew. So let's go ahead and get into the Convict. So, the Convict is the alternative red character if you remember the way that the draft works inside of Nemesis Aftermath. Where if during a regular Nemesis game you chose not to pick the soldier, the Convict is your alternative choice. But the question becomes, why would you want to do this? What kind of objectives do you want to pick with said Convict? Well, if I'm being totally honest, it's kind of a bit hard to gauge with the Convict, just because there's a lot of things going on mechanically during the game and inside of our action deck to really choose. But hopefully by the end of this video we'll be able to strategize that a lot better. So let's go ahead and get started with her main thing. That kind of makes her the most unique playstyle wise. So interestingly, if you choose to play as the Convict instead of the soldier, the starting items of the Convict require more than one player to actually work. So it's a bit more dependent on two people having to work together. Again, the Convict is definitely not designed for cooperative play, just with the way that the starting items work. And basically, it's at the start of the game, give this item to the bounty hunter. If there is no bounty hunter present, give this item to any other character of your choice. And essentially what it is that the Convict was taken in. So, the Convict actually starts with cuffs on when she was taken aboard the Nemesis. So she was captured, put in these cuffs. So right out of the gate, you're pretty handicapped, as this is a heavy item, meaning that one of your hand slots is already locked up from the get-go. And somebody else has these cuff keys that they're the only way to take them off. I'll be talking about the bounty hunter in my next video, but if they choose to give you this item, or if the bounty hunter chooses to let you go, then they can scan these cuff keys and take off those handcuffs. But granted, you're a convict, so who knows if you can actually be trusted. But it's an interesting dynamic because, again, this doesn't work for solo play at all because there's no other player to give this to. So you might as well be stuck in cuffs the whole time. Or if you're in co-op play, they're going to try to get you out of the cuffs anyway to free up that hand slot. But now, let's go ahead and go into the quest items. So, the Convict's quest items are actually quite interesting in comparison to a lot of other Nemesis characters, because the first one that we're going to be talking about is the pipe. As you can see, you can literally activate this item in any room that you want. It could literally be right out of the gate, as you still have a hand slot when you still have the cuffs on. But you could just go ahead and turn this on right at the gate. And essentially what it does is that it is a melee weapon that you can only use in combat, obviously, and it takes up a hand slot. But essentially what it does is you only suffer a light wound when you miss during a melee attack action. And if you should discard this card, flip it over instead, as this item cannot be traded. So it's basically an item that, yes, you could in theory lose it, but you're not actually ever going to lose it. It's a quest item you always have because you can find pipes everywhere on the ship. And the fact that you only suffer a light wound on melee attacks, whew, buddy, let me tell you that being cornered by an alien without any ammo happens so much more often than you think it does. And then you just not wanting to risk death is fantastic. You can just go to town with this pipe a little bit more. Granted, the only thing you got to keep in mind is that, yes, it only reduces the wounds to a light wound, but you're still taking contamination cards, which could come back to bite you in the ass later. The next quest item card that you have is the Augmented Arm, and it can only be activated if you make your way to the surgery room. The way that the Augmented Arm works is that it is not a one-time use. You can use this at the cost of 1 action each time. However, you get to either perform a rest action or place this card on any of your undressed serious wounds. As long as it remains there, ignore the effect of that serious wound. Honestly, very powerful card, especially when I cover the trait card in just a moment. But essentially what this does is that you get to perform a rest action every turn. If your hand is full of contamination cards and you want to get rid of them, then if you have the augmented arm, you could just perform a rest action by playing a card to activate the augmented arm. It is fantastic. I don't know how many times I've been stuck in situations to where you got so many contamination cards, but you can't get to that one rest card that you've been trying to get to. But now the Convict has a solution for that, to where you can do that. Or you basically, for free, get to quote-unquote dress a wound with the augmented arm. Granted, even though you're taking away the effect of a serious wound, you still have undressed serious wounds, which could still be a problem when it comes to the wound threshold. However, this is where the trait card comes into play. As with other cards in Nemesis, trait cards are passives that certain characters have access to. And the Convict's is that she's pretty tough. You only die when receiving any wound after your 4th serious wound instead of your 3rd. You could still be killed normally by intruder attack card effects. This is pretty huge. Making yourself a little bit extra tougher than everybody else could be the difference between life and death. It really is. Going that one wound further, the fact that you can have that augmented arm to reduce it even further to kind of still push over your limit could literally be the difference in how you win and how you lose. So, if I gotta be honest, it's pretty good. It's a pretty good trait card. But now, as the last final step before we cover the mission objectives of what you would want to pick as the Convict, let's go through the action deck real quick. As is the usual case with a majority of Nemesis characters, the Convict has an action deck of 10 cards, to where you have the typical stuff like Demolition, 2 search cards, a rest card, and here is where we get to the actual majority of the new stuff. So, this card basically plays like a reaction card, sort of into the same vein as an interruption, meaning that you don't have to play this during combat, whether you're in it or not, or things like that. You could just play this to either discard this card to cancel an action performed by another character in the room, as just a normal interruption card, or instead, discard this card immediately after another character in your room performs a search action to get the card that they discarded. Honestly, it's really freaking huge, because, as you know, with search cards, you pick up 2, you choose one you want to keep, and you discard the other. It also just makes it to where you don't want to telegraph in front of the person playing the Convict of, ooh, these are both really good items, sucks that I couldn't keep both. When the Convict's like, sweet, I'll just take the other item that you didn't want. Or if you think they're both crappy items, then the Convict can then take them there. Honestly, this is a way better version of the interrupt cards, because it gives you so many more options in comparison to a lot of other characters. The next card that we have is a good old-fashioned repairs card for only 1 extra card, which is nice. Makes her, again, a better repair character in comparison to a lot of other basics. Then we have the not in combat short temper card. Costs you nothing, you just play this card, and you could use a room action without paying its cost. But the key thing is that you can do this even if the room contains a malfunction marker. Then you would perform a noise roll in this room after that room action. Freaking huge. Sometimes you just don't have the tools or resources in order to do so. And this is one of the best ways to sabotage other people. Because you creating that noise roll might cause problems in the future. Or it might just be that one thing to where you don't have any yellow items or weren't able to get to them in time, but you still have a means of using a room action. Again, it's really freaking powerful because we're starting to see more characters have the ability to use room actions without paying costs, and it's gonna help them out tenfold. The next card we have is Catch This. It costs you an extra card, and you can only use this while you're in combat. And what it does is that you discard a heavy item. You move from the room you are in without triggering an intruder attack. This is honestly pretty good, as instead of using a weapon, like ammo or anything like that, it's basically your tactical retreats or your covering fires and things like that, but instead you just throw heavy items at them. And a lot of times, even though these items would go away, sometimes if you pick up the right heavy thing, you might be able to pick it back up again, which is pretty nice. Again, it's a pretty good card. Next card that we have is Opportunist, which can be used pretty much at any time during your turn. It's not in combat, out of combat, and it only costs you an extra card to use. And then you may perform a basic move action when you are in a room with another character. Intruders don't attack you during that movement, and then you get to close the door in the corridor you move through. Basically, you get to just walk on through, be like, sorry pal, you're on your own. You close the door, and you leave them behind with the alien that was in the room with you. Honestly, it's kind of a dig move, but it works totally. It totally works. Fantastic card. And then the last one we have is Bash. It's another combat-only card. So where it costs you nothing, you just do it. And then you perform a melee attack. You deal 1 additional injury even if you miss. So, as we can see here, the Convict, unlike the Soldier, who is really good with his guns and range, not being able to be surprised super easily, the Convict is very, very, very melee focused. So, the best kind of objectives that you kind of want to go with her is things like doing research on an intruder corpse, maybe killing the queen, and things of that nature. As far as personal objectives, maybe trying to get out of there would do you better. I'm not entirely sure how that would work best, but overall, the Convict is a very melee-focused character. She's not going to really get access or use a whole lot of guns, which, even though the guns are definitely the safer option, it's not so bad with the Convict. So you give yourself more tools and more versatility. And as we saw, there's plenty of combat cards to where she's not totally useless in a fight. The biggest way, as a person who isn't playing as the Convict, to ensure that the Convict doesn't cause too many problems, is to just keep the handcuffs on. If you're the one with the keys, make sure that they don't get out of the handcuffs. Or if somebody else was trying to give the handcuffs to the Convict to let them out, make sure that that doesn't happen, because that's going to be the biggest way that you stop a lot of the momentum that a Convict is going to have, because they're only going to have one hand slot, and they have to make a decision on what that hand slot's going to use, and it's going to severely restrict just how capable they really are. So I would say that that's the only con, but otherwise, make sure you guys leave your comments down below. Let me know what you thought about this or about the Convict, and I will see you guys in the next video.